Cameron House is a 5-star hotel. It's a very, very nice place. It's really beautiful, right on the banks of Loch Lomond. We went to like a place they've got there called the Boat House, which is basically like a kind of bistro, which is attached to the like little marina bit. It was all right.
You're disappointed. You spent about £300 and it was crap.
No, we didn't spend that much money, and it's a beautiful place. The food was. There's actually a place about a quarter of a mile away called Duck Bay Marina where the food is actually a lot better. So we hadn't realised that anyway.
You sometimes get that when you've got the location, like they can get away with having slightly below average or average type fare because everyone knows that basically it's a trap. Like you're gonna go and sit there for the occasion and your wife's birthday, etc. You know, and you're not going to complain about the food. Obviously, create a scene. You know, you're not going to do that. So yeah, I think that inevitably happens.
Yeah. Other than that, because it's my daughter's birthday a couple of days ago, and it's my birthday like a few days before that. Yeah, we've got three. We've got 3 within a week. So for my wife's birthday, there's no birthday cake. We've got enough cake by that point. So
caked out.
She's unfortunately her birth right is to get no cake anymore.
That's fair enough, mate. Sometimes you can have too much of that. It's got to be a special occasion. If it's all lined up, it can be difficult, can't it? So there we go.
Exactly.
Anyway, listen. Also, some big news on your side. You might as well tell people because people know you in Brainfood Live. They've seen you for various iterations, but obviously something's happened in your professional life in the last 24 hours, hasn't it?
Yeah. Well, way to describe it, I'm unemployed, I guess. I was co-founder and CEO of Candidate ID. It was a unique technology product in demand from sophisticated TA teams, I would say. Not mass market product. We were acquired by iCIMS, the biggest talent acquisition tech company in the world. Very much used by the masses. The world's biggest applicant tracking system business, and marketing automation. Candidate ID needed bigger wings at some point, and iCIMS was the perfect bird with the big wings. And so they've taken it on really well. They've got a lot more customers using marketing automation and talent acquisition than we did as an independent company. They've got bigger teams working on it and all that kind of thing. And I did a pretty good integration. So I've now left because the integration's complete. The team that I took into that business, they're all in new jobs in the organization with different managers, and it's going to work out really great for iCIMS and for that team that went and joined them as well. So I'm a big cheerleader, supporting them from the side, and hopefully they will go ahead and make it mainstream.
What does that mean for you, though? Are you actually now not working there? So you access has been cut off. You don't have the key. You can't get into the building. You know, that kind of stuff.
I'm not like standing trying to get in the building or anything, but access has been cut off, so it's quite brutal. I left the organization a couple of days ago, and having done what I was asked to do on day one, which was supervise a really good integration, the people, the technology, the product roadmap, the customers, of course, sales pipeline, and there was multiple different strands of that, workflows, like working groups attached to all of that, and I got a good learning because I haven't worked for a large technology business ever. And so honestly, the amount of people that I learned from and the amount of ways that I saw this is how you actually, run a proper scaled up organization with 4,000 or 5,000 customers and 1,500 people. I learned a lot from iCIMS on this is how you go about doing that. I was like, right, now I understand. Okay, so
a professional business, unlike the ramshackled, the jolly ship that you ran, which was obviously your own business, but it's different when you've got to integrate into a bigger mothership, isn't it? So
I mean, completely. It's just a different thing when you're building a business from the beginning. There's bits flying off all over the place, and you have to work like that. And you're going to be successful or not based on, can you cope with the fact that like 90% of what you're doing is living in ambiguity, right? Most people can't do that. So, getting it to the point where, the concept is proven. There's enough market validation and customers and uptake and customers scaling up their use and things like that. Once you get to that point, it's a different discipline in running an organization that can just put almost endless amounts of money into it and just pull the right levers in a slightly different direction. So it's different disciplines. It's a completely different type of thing, different working life. As is, if you take from like iSIMS to running Microsoft or something like that, again, an entirely different type of organization. iSIMS I would consider a large scale up. Is what I would, it's not like a Series B stage scale up, but I mean, it's a company worth billions, and it is a large scale, scale up organization, pretty much ready for IPO, and the structure of an organization, all the metrics, everything's totally different, and it was great to learn about it.
On that note, it'd actually be very interesting as a career for a recruiter to be able to work at different stages of maturity for a business. So I wonder whether you've ever had that experience, folks. Have you worked like in micro startup, pre-money? Have you worked scale up, Series A, go great? Have you worked sort of in that kind of middle bit where you're trying to get to IPO or whatever? Have you worked for a business that is a mature organization in the marketplace? I think all of those things are quite different type of roles, and it would probably be a perfect recruitment career if you had those experiences in different places. Anyway, we're completely sidetracking. Go on.
Just one really quick thing to add to that. See the difference between a startup business and a scale-up business is the processes in a scale-up business are much, much more deliberate, and there's a lot more of them. In a startup business, you have to think on your feet like every single day, and you're probably going to change most of your processes every single day. Whereas in a scale-up business, the processes have now been set, and now it's all about just crank everything up, do it more, do it faster, the same thing. So
and because of that existing protocol, there's also resistance to change in the same way where a super early business won't have, because there hasn't been an established way of doing it. So if you're a new person coming in, for instance, the more mature business you have, the more requirement you may need to kind of manage the changes that you want to implement. It's not as simple as just saying we're doing this, unless you've got a kind of a combustible sort of personality. Like I can't help but think of someone like Donald Trump, for instance, who just bullying a China shop. Elon Musk just go in there, burn it down, don't care. But you can see it's very, very destructive methodology to do that. Whereas that would kind of be normal behavior for a startup, right? You wouldn't need to break any hearts to do some of those things, because there wasn't an existing thing. So anyway, we're totally getting off the track here, folks, because we're here to talk about candidate experience, god damn it. So welcome everybody to Brainfood Live on Air. It's episode 191, bringing it to you every Friday, no fail. Had a bit of a segue because obviously Adam, the co-pilot, has lost his job recently, or has left his job recently and is unemployed. So we wanted to explore that a little bit. It might actually be an interesting topic to discuss at some point, actually. Like, what is the psychological process of, setting a business, selling it, and then actually having to exit, not having to, but, voluntarily exiting out, what the psychological process is, and, what the next move is, So anyway, another point. Great to see everybody here. Quick sound check. If anyone can hear us on Crowdcast, please let me know. I think you can, actually, because we can see people commenting. We are live also on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. So I think everyone can hear us there. If you can't, let us know on the chat. If you can, let us know in the chat. It's important we know that everyone can hear us okay. All right. Today we're going to be talking about the two big philosophies of candidate experience. Do you personalize it or do you standardize it? I know everyone's going to say, yes, Hung, you can do both. Answer is you can't, because we have limited resources and you have to make a trade-off at some point. If you went and personalized every single bit of candidate experience to every single candidate, you'll be doing nothing other than providing concierge services to candidates. You won't be doing any hiring. So you have to do some standardization. But where do you bring that in? And at what point does standardization actually become a problem in terms of the customer experience or the candidate experience people get? So we're going to bring on a bunch of guests that have got great experience of this. Interesting enough, the guests that are going to come on have got that experience in different sort of stages of business and scale of business. And I think that makes a difference as well. So be very excited to explore that with you. Okay, cool. Listen, as always, folks, Brainfood Live on Air is sponsored. Every week somebody comes up and says, you know what, we're going to support this type of this conversation. We think it's worthwhile. This week, I'm delighted to say it's the first sponsorship of the year from one of the coolest companies I know, from one of the coolest CEOs I know, a company called Starred. And they're a great employee feedback, candidate feedback type of tool, probably best described as a talent intelligence tool these days. But don't let me kind of tell you all about it. Why don't we bring on the CEO of the business, a good friend of mine called Lars. He's going to come on, hopefully wearing swag, and he's going to tell us all about this wonderful company. So Lars, I know you've been kind of waiting on the wings, spending expensive CEO time to come on to Brainfood Live on Air. Did you see, by the way, Brainfood Live on Air is starting to get quoted as a source for material? It's crazy. Like, sources. And
why? Because you and I know absolutely nothing about it. That's why.
Exactly. We know nothing, but there we go. But Lars knows something. And look at him. He's actually obeyed the instruction to wear some swag. He's got it on. Whoa, get in there.
Swag and good hair, he said.
I was going to say the hair looks amazing. Well done, mate. Listen, Lars, it's great to see you, sir. And sorry we didn't catch up when you were last in London. Next time you're there, of course, let us know. But why don't you introduce yourself to the crowd? Who are you? What it is you do? And tell us why we won't care about Starred. Like, who cares about it? Why is it important?
Well, thanks for having me, Hung. So I'm Lars. I'm the founder of Starred. Starred is the market leader in measuring and optimizing the candidate experience, natively integrated with your ATS. So therefore, we're big fans, obviously, of the topic of this Brainfood Live. And how we work, we gather feedback from both hired and rejected candidates, and can tell you exactly for every recruiter, every hiring manager, every department, what you should do differently tomorrow to actually improve your recruitment process. So we're literally opening the recruitment black box when it comes to the hiring metrics.
Tell us a little bit about how and when you collect this information, man, because I understand CX, in the olden days, it was like, okay, let's ask the dude after the interview, how'd it go? You get some sort of rating card. How is this any different? How has it evolved sort of at this point? Like, has there been significant changes from candidate experience from 2016, let's say, to 2023?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So we did a lot of testing, and what we advise all our clients is to ask for the feedback at the end of the process, so not during the process, and also to work with a certain delay. So if you reject a candidate and you ask for feedback instantly, they're still high in their emotion, and you won't get the most honest feedback. So a delay of 2 or 3 days can definitely help to get honest feedback on that.
This would be an interesting component of our conversation later, I think, in terms of like, how do you measure? When do you measure? Because I think a great deal of time, we get confused by the responses. And as you say, it's very emotional to be in a situation when you're being selected, yes or no, that's a rejection point. Everyone's been rejected here, I hope. We've had that learning experience. And it is one of the worst feelings. It's a very, very horrible feeling to be judged and not good enough, whatever the circumstances are. So I don't think that is ever going to be psychologically comfortable. And that's part of the thing we're trying to deal with, because of course in recruitment, we do more rejecting than we do hiring. right? Just in terms of the numbers of people coming in, that's the facts. So we have to get this part right. Okay, Lars, listen, why don't you hang around with us? We might be able to bring you back. I don't know if you've got other stuff to do. Obviously, you're CEO in this business, so I totally get it if you've got other stuff on. But if you're going to hang around, go on. If I see you there, I might bring you back on screen to get your insights on various points.
That's always great. And if I can highlight one thing, Han, I promised Jasper, so I will do it. We're currently working on the candidate experience benchmark report for 2022, and we will present that in our webinar on the 15th of February. So the link will be shared in the chat. And why are industry benchmark so important? Well, either you're behind on the benchmark and you need to invest in great candidate experience to hit your hiring goals, or you're actually ahead of the benchmark, which is a great proof point to leadership that you're winning the war for talent, and something you can use in your employer branding.
Right. So you've collected the data and you're going to present it on the 15th. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, amazing. Well, why don't you share, or Jasper, if he's watching us, share the link in the chat stream and also on LinkedIn. I'm sure the folks on LinkedIn want to see this as well. So let me know, folks, if that's the case. And make sure you sign up on the 15th. That's going to be a week's time away. Great stuff. Okay, Lars, great to see you, man. We'll catch up soon, okay?
Thanks, Adam. Bye-bye.
Good dude, man. I like him. He's good. It's good value for his stuff. So yeah, absolutely. Go and sign up for this. This sounds like an interesting thing. I do love it when vendors actually produce data like this, where they, go to the effort of actually surveying and collecting information on aggregate and presenting it. Obviously, recruitment vendors will have an agenda against that, and it's good marketing to ploys and whatever, but it's add value marketing. It's stuff that actually might help people. iSIMS actually do a very good job of this, I feel, with some of their reports. So yeah, it's very important. Okay, cool. Let's talk about this, Adam. Before we bring our initial guests on, I just want to get your view on this concept of personalized versus standardized. I mean, what's your thoughts on this? I mean, is there a way you'd lean one way or the other based on circumstances or context or whatnot?
Yeah, absolutely. So you said earlier, you can't do both, and I entirely disagree with that. You have to do both, and otherwise you can't scale. So you've got to think about, from the minute somebody becomes aware of your organization as an employer to the minute they retire for good and are not coming back into the workplace, how do you make sure that your relationship with them is ongoing, and it's ongoing in a way that is personalized and automated, and the moments that matter are the ones where you have human contact? The moments that matter are the first stage conversation, the exit interview, the job offer. There's about 4 or 5 things which have to be a human delivered communication, and almost everything else can be automated. And when you're using something like marketing automation technology, or something which adapts the individual's experience based on their clicks and what that means to what they should be getting next, you need to be thinking about next best action at every single touch point. When you've thought about all of that, you're going to get this subject right.
Right, fair enough. It seems like something you might know a little bit about, Adam, which
surprises you too.
It does, yeah.
Massively.
It does. But there we go.
I've only done this show with you 150 times or something, and I know there's only 1 in 5 things I do know about, but I know a bit about this one.
You got a limited repertoire, mate. That's the thing.
Yes.
But that's all right. Your primary quality is availability, mate. So it's like he's always
insight means in mind.
That's it. There she is. It's Christine. How are you, Christine?
How's it going?
Yeah, great to see you. Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you? How's Hong Kong?
It's great. I'm in my mother's kitchen at the moment with a crazy light setup, which is suboptimal, but it's actually not great to do a sort of an evening sort of thing, because the lighting is obviously not as good as in the day. It's amazing how much natural light actually helps. But there we go. Anyway, we've got Heidi and Christine with us. So let's introduce our wonderful guests. Christine, as you came on first, why don't you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Sure. So I'm currently at a quantum computing startup called Quantum Motion. I've actually been here for a year and a half now, which is amazing because I always feel like it was just yesterday. We're now about 40 people. I think the last time I came here, we were 20, and very much still startup mode, just about to fundraise our Series B. So very exciting time for us.
So you've doubled the headcount of the business since you've last been on Brainfood, Christine, is that right?
But in a very small way. It's not been, rocket ship growth, right? It's a nice healthy amount.
It's all
growth,
about,
I think, is considered rocket ship growth.
Yeah, I think that's definitely double. So that's awesome. So you see the benefits of going on to Brainfood. It gives your professional career momentum. There's evidence right there. All right, we've got Heidi here as well. Heidi, great to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me back on here, Hung, and Adam. Heidi Wassini worked with talent acquisition past 16 years in both big companies with 10,000 people, smaller companies, startup, scale up. Latest gig was in Vivino, scaling the Vivino part. And recently joined the RL100. And I don't know what else to say.
exciting news as well. RL100, that's like a premium group to be part of. So well done on that. And it's a great learning sort of experience, great learning group as well. So wonderful things. Okay, let's talk about this topic, folks. I mean, I think we had a number of kind of opportunities to discuss this online, where we talked about, okay, how do we go about and do this? And I know what I wonder what your thoughts are on this, because how this came about in my mind was, we kind of want to do standardize as because we're all metric driven and we want to have comparative data. We want to be fair as well, right? So, we can't have people, hiring managers treating candidates to, nice cozy meals here and hiring manager B not bothering even meeting them, right? We can't have that. We say, no, have a standardized, consistent recruitment. We train hiring managers to do that, which is great. However, is it coming to the point where you're so standardized that actually you lose the nuance? Like sometimes maybe that candidate does need to go out and have a dinner with that hiring manager because of the psychology of that person or the circumstances of that individual, or even the social history between the two might mean that you can't. Why are we pretending to ignore that? Right. So let's imagine there's a candidate that you've worked with before in the past. Would you not treat that person differently from someone who you didn't know? I mean, it would be absurd to try and think that you would, do otherwise, right? So what are your thoughts on that? How do you approach this? And is this something you've wrestled with as you try to create a candidate journey for your businesses? Thoughts on this? Let's go with you first, Christine.
Yeah, I mean, as you're saying that, I thought about my time at Yieldify. So I think in startup land, we don't really have the luxury to not have it personalized because no one knows who your company is. You're trying to get people from, especially in my world, product and tech, you're trying to get engineers who don't know your brand at all. So it has to be highly personalized. And some of my previous successes were actually working collaboratively with our CTO, who at the time was ex-Google, teaches computer science at Cambridge. When you're hiring these engineers, you have to rope in the entire team to say, look, meet him for dinner, meet him for, go and check out his meetup. Like it has to be really highly personalized. Otherwise, there's no way someone's going to join your company, right? Unless they know who they're working with.
Okay, really good point. So weak employer brand, based because you're new or whatever it is, you have to go concierge over the top even, because you will otherwise not be able to compete. And oftentimes, by the way, you might be a high risk startup, for instance, or sometimes you don't have the compensation ready at that point. You've got to sell that story, so you're still in that sales and pitch mode. You have to go overboard, show people the love. So okay, there's a classic example. We go hyper personalized. Adam, you're upset with this? Go ahead.
No, I'm not. I'm happy with this, and I want to add to it. I think Christine's absolutely correct. However, this also extends to enterprise or other organizations who either have a unknown brand, which is not many if they're an enterprise organization, but some like that are behind the scenes might. It also extends to those organizations that are unfashionable or they're toxic. So they're unfashionable because what they do for a living is make cigarettes, or they are toxic because they've got a CEO like Elon Musk. So the same thing applies to this.
It's a really good point. You have to bring in EB into this then, because maybe the first thing you do with candidate experience, even before you think about it, is to consider what the employer brand is, not only at consumer level, but to the audience you care about. Is it significant in whatever way? And then that can shape how you deliver at least the early stage of CX. Heidi, you definitely want to say something about all of that. What are your thoughts?
I mainly agree with what you're saying, Christine and Adam also. And basically I felt like you nailed it in the beginning. I was like, okay, that was the show, Adam. Let's close it down there. But what you said resonated with me in terms of having a brand for some reason or another. It's unknown. It's a bad reputation. However, what I also see is that a lot of, and it's not only limited to startup, obviously, but if you don't have some kind of standardization of the process, the candidate experience is not necessarily a good one. It may be personalized, but it's not necessarily a good one, because the minute you're out of their sight, they may forget all about you, because there's no process in place to actually catch all those candidates that are not known or are not part of the interesting pipeline that you want to nurture. So I think that there's something to be said about that. And then there's also the other thing. If you're building something and you are looking into how do I do this unbiased, how do I do this with a diversity mindset, you need to kind of have some kind of different approach to it that becomes a little bit of standardization with the personalization. Otherwise, I think that you're just risking hiring all the kind of same people as yourself.
Or it could just be chaos, right? I mean, I think there's an element where in the very early stages, it is a bit throwing things out. I mean, maybe that culture is now gone in the current atmosphere. But rewind back 6 months or so ago, that was still the concept. If you got a big cash infusion or whatever, hire, competing away, and you would end up doing what is extraordinary things outside of a protocol in order to secure these these recruits. So maybe it's a little bit of go ahead, Heidi.
No, I'm just saying I think that's partially part of the problem. It's just hire, but it's not necessarily hire right. So I think that is also, if you just kind of take a breather and step back, and instead of just thinking about hire as fast as possible, you look at other areas as well.
Yeah, I think certainly that entire paradigm has shifted, hasn't it, over the last because we've had 2 tranches of big redundancies now, where and those have come from the hire fast type of organizations. So once you've done it once is bad, but twice in about 18 months or so, it's kind of really bad. So probably that's going to change. But I think there is something there about the maturity of the business and the maturity of the brand, which maybe mean that, hey, weaker EB, a little bit more concierge. But as you get doing it, maybe I don't know how many hires you end up sort of developing, but at some point you develop some sort of rhythm. And that's when you might start documenting it and saying, from our experiments of doing all of this, these things seem to be effective. You can even start identifying certain strengths and weaknesses in amongst your process with regards to who hiring managers or which colleagues are particularly good. Look at training ones that are great. Look at improving ones that are moving people away if they're not particularly effective at those things. So maybe the procedure part comes in a little bit after that concierge side. Okay. What about sort of the idea of when we start putting in some sort of standardization for equity purposes? How do we do that? Is there a framework in our mind where we apply, or is it more like you're spot checking stuff to say, oh, look, we seem to be going out and having beers as a get to know you session, and then you realize actually no, who really enjoys beers? Oh, typically young men more than anybody else. And, hey, presto, we seem to be hiring more of those. So, like, is it more spot checks, or is there some sort of framework you could deploy to kind of make sure that your concierge is not going down that sort of heavily biased route?
Guidelines.
Such a good question. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. You're saying, Adam?
Guidelines. Don't take people out drinking. Would be one of them.
See, that kills candidate experience in the UK straight away.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Tough luck. It needs to. I mean, that happened. That's happened to me plenty of times where I've ended up getting. I got one job in an extremely well-known Big Four professional services firm.
Just name them. We've all seen your CV, mate. It's PwC.
You haven't. You've never seen it. You don't think I've got any experience in anything. But honestly, the guy took me out for a 6-hour session in a pub called the Beehive in London, and I got the job.
Got wrecked. Nice. Absolute wrecked.
So I agree with them, by the way. Death to the beer culture. I think it's not okay.
Is that the Beehive in New North Road, by the way? Because that's like literally around the corner.
Just off Baker Street. No, it's not. Just off Baker Street. Yeah. But I agree with them, by the way. There, death to the beer culture. I think stuff like that needs stamped out. It's 2023. We're no longer in 2001.
I think it's impossible these days anyway, because essentially we've shifted to remote, and the concept of going out and getting hammered, I think is very much associated with office culture. It will be quite hard to encourage people because it's almost like everyone's knackered at the end of the day. And we can't face the commute. It's so bad. The commute is so bad. Is that the only solution is to do it when you're completely, off your head. And that was basically the policy, the unstated policy of British office culture. But maybe that's gone, And
I read from somewhere that I don't think it was a tech company. They actually sent the candidate. It was a remote interview. They got a free lunch voucher type thing. So I was like, oh, that's quite nice. It's like, thanks for taking the time during your lunch break to do an interview with us. Here's a free lunch, and that's I say free lunch, but here's your time, which could land much better than, hey, let's go for beers, especially if they're working remotely. Can't say no to a freebie.
Yeah, and let's not forget as well the old beer thing was also like the final assessment, wasn't it? It was like that's when the boss would whisper some secret crap to your ear, and you see how you'd react. Drop some horrendous sort of values to
the culture fit interview.
Exactly.
It was reaffirming. Male suit wearing, like patriarchy and lad culture in the office, which got people like me promoted and shouldn't happen.
Yeah. I think that's probably right. I think that's definitely right. Okay, so I don't know how we got to this point, but
by standardizing the process, so that
So very legitimately though, candidate experience may be a big part of this. Moving it away from just the professional assessment exercise, isn't it? I mean, one way to think about candidate experience is to say, look, we've been like completely focused on extracting information from this person, and we've dissected him or her. We actually need to do something else, and let's have another way to have a conversation outside of this forensic sort of analysis. And it might be going out and doing something. That's another way to bond or to exchange information. So let's say we do that without narcotics. How do we, what are we talking about here? What's the options?
I think that's where the personalization comes in. Let's try to figure out what is it that the candidates that are in the process actually care about. There must be different ways to figure out what would be working for that particular person. Should you go to a mystery escape room? Should you, there are plenty of ways. And even when you think diversity as well, there are people, parents with smaller kids. There are people who are more extroverts and introverts, just to use the popular term. And when you have all these factors lined in on it, that's where I don't think you can do the standardization. That's where the human touch and the personalization comes in. Really caring about that individual in the process.
Yeah. So what you're saying, Heidi, if I understand you correctly, is that you should actually ask the candidate. I think that's okay, but wouldn't that put a little bit of pressure on the candidate who might be like very keen to get the job? So, like, would it not be? I don't know. I would feel like I would say yes to anything, but simply because I want the job, and I don't want to be saying no, sorry, I ain't doing that. So is there a way in which we could kind of surface up what the person wants and have something that's suitable without, asking the person to be a killjoy, basically?
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of find it.
sorry,
Sorry, go on.
Christine.
Sorry, go on, Heidi. Go for it.
No, you go first, Christine. It's all good.
Yeah, no, I mean, because I got to kind of diverge away from this particular topic. So go for it.
You said if that would put pressure on the candidate, and I think that partially, absolutely yes, and at the same time, you want to create that kind of trust during the process. You want to create a space where the candidate feels like they can express their opinion, and if we are to find out whether or not we're a good match for each other, then that there should be some kind of mutual way of communicating. I don't think I have the complete answer for it, but there should be some kind of a mutual way of communicating different options, like Odette is saying, where you can pick different. I was at a job interview actually recently, and the question I got there was, if we're to do something after work, what would be your preference of choice to do? And I didn't find that question intimidating at all.
That's
because
a really
there was no
good,
right or wrong answer.
That's a really good way to phrase it. I wonder whether you could just repeat that for the audience, Heidi. That's worth noting down.
If we are working together, we're doing a whole work day together. If you were to plan something for us after work, for us to do something together as a team, what would that activity be?
Okay.
Yeah, it's good, and it could be anything.
It reminds me. This issue reminds me of the concept of flexible benefits. So you join an organization, you get a salary, and then you get a big menu of, look, you've got whatever amount of money, which can go on to any of these different things. They could be well-being things, it could be bicycles, it could be, whatever you want it to be. And there's a big menu laid out. So that's good employee experience. And that Big Four professional services firm I talked about earlier, they gave me a really, really brilliant package. And that was back in like 2004 or something like that. And, that flexible, you can spend X% of your total comp on things that are like good for your lifestyle. That way of thinking for this process that we're talking about would be very useful.
I still think it puts a bit too much pressure on the candidate, in my view, because it may well be, for instance, that candidate may just be going through multiple processes and they themselves might just be assessing, okay, what am I going to get from these folks? And then suddenly you have to make decisions. So I'm not sure whether, I sympathize with what your position is, but I'm not sure whether it's entirely suited for every scenario. Here, we might go back to what you do as a business, I wonder. I was speaking to a guy called Marcel Edwards. I don't know whether you know him. He's the head of, he's a great dude.
Adidas.
Yeah, he works for Adidas and obviously big consumer brand, etc. So I actually tried to get him on the show, but he actually ghosted me, ignored. So Marcel, if you're watching this, anyway, he was telling me that actually, there is a standard process because they have to recognize that their brand is recognized, right? So they can't just treat themselves as a normal company because everyone has something like Adidas on them. Like everyone owns something from this company. So yes, there is a tour into the shops. That's where they do their initial kind of meet and greet. There is a kind of a tour in the factory and stuff like this. So they know all of this stuff, and that's all branding. There's no assessments. It's just like, hey, we're gonna give you this kind of show to show how it works. Now, obviously, that has high impact and high value. Everyone walks away thinking, what an amazing day. And obviously, not all of us can repeat that because we only have a B2, most of us work B2B. Or even if we work B2C these days, let's say it's an online delivery type service, like Vivino was, for instance, it may not be the same as like going to an old school vineyard. So the shift to digital has actually caused some interesting challenges for differentiation on CX, because if interviewing remote, the job's remote, everything's via Zoom, like how much differentiation can you actually do in the candidate experience? And that kind of leans itself a little bit more to, this vanilla standardization approach. So, I don't know what your thoughts are on that. We've got to bring some of the guests on, but let's leave it with you two with a final question. Shift to remote, using that sort of big trend. what would you say is a way in which you could kind of still make sure the candidates have a remarkable experience with your company, even though, you know, we are like, you know, just looking into a screen most of the time?
Yeah,
Go on,
I think
Christine.
keeping it simple, right? I think having your values, I think, which is why I think we're talking about automation and whatnot. Really, it's just the basic principles. Make sure they're aware of what the timeframes are going to look like. We will actually get back to them in the timeframes that say we're going to get back to, and giving them feedback. It's just the core basic principles of recruitment. And that's where automation, I think, comes from, right? Like, when's the last touch point? Set a boomerang or a little message that sends back to you in a week's time and say, hey, get back to this candidate. And I think that's all I can do at the moment because I'm doing 20 other things. But I think just really nailing the basic principles, and that's what core candidate experience is. It's their touch point with you as the business, right? And that's what I always say. Like, you can go to a restaurant, the food could be crap, but the experience could be amazing, and then you go and tell everyone else about it. And I think the same applies in what we do.
You're absolutely right, Christine. There's a couple of things, isn't there, that are actually. I'm trying to think what the report was, but there was some sort of report that came out recently about what the priorities of a candidates were. And actually, it'd be interesting to go to start an event to see whether this is actually a question asked. But the first thing was like, okay, speed of process, right? So let's not have an overly long thing. So that's the first thing you got to think about. Transparency, another one. Like, is it clear what the process is? So if it is a multi-long process, say that, and actually, you know, the expectations are set. Don't be dropping in extra stages that the person isn't aware of. That's terrible UX. Doesn't matter if you have big budgets to take them off dinner or whatever. So some basic sort of recruitment processing, basic transparency, high communication points. And Adam, to your point very early when you said it, it's like the obvious important moments in the process have to be human touch. You can't just, you know, casually send an email on a rejection if the person's gone through and spent time with the application and gone through process. So your thoughts on this, Heidi? Shift to remote, you know, how does that impact CX?
I think that of course there are different ways that you can it will impact the CX, because sometimes especially in smaller companies or in startup scale-ups, the office is like a swag in itself. But I think that there is leewaying off what Christine said. There's also like helping the candidate through the process, making them realize how can they prepare best for a video interview, how do they do a Zoom, what is it that they should be aware of when they interview, what kind of interview should you be expecting from us? Are we just having a casual conversation? Are we doing a competency-based interview? And if so, what does that mean? And then also treat the candidate with respect and gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for doing this. If you have an opportunity to maybe give a voucher for a lunch or something else that actually shows that we value your time. The only differentiator really is time. Time is the only thing you cannot buy more of or get more of. So really value that time that candidates spend in the process.
I think that's a really good point. The respect level is I think, obviously something that's a little bit been lacking generally in recruiting. And it's also very variable. That's one part of the recruiting process, which is frustrating because we do kind of treat the highly skilled, in-demand, rare candidates, so to speak, with the concierge approach, as you mentioned, Christine. But, you know, there's another human being that may actually be one of many, many candidates. And, you know, we kind of think, okay, we can, you know, get away with a poorer experience because there's another candidate can fill them, which is not a great way to behave at all. So yeah, there's got to be better ways to approach it than that. Okay, cool. Listen, we've got to move on and get other guests on. Christine, Heidi, thanks for joining us and giving us your insights, particularly of these, you know, rapid growth, smaller businesses that have to work with smaller resources. Please do hang around for the rest of the show. We're going to bring on a couple more guests and talk about what it's like at the bigger level, at the enterprise scale. So great to see you, Christine, and Heidi. We'll see you soon, okay?
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Cool. Very, very smart people, those two. And yeah. Oh, folks, by the way, we might as well use this moment as we always do. Brainfood Live on Air is a talk show that has to come off air, amazingly enough. At some point, we're going to have to go off in about 20 minutes. But this is a topic that's important for a lot of people. And if you're keen to continue this conversation, there's no reason why Brainfood Live should be a stopper of the conversation. So now is the time. I think, to take a moment, grab your LinkedIn URL and add it to the chat stream on Crowdcast. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, take your LinkedIn URL and add it to the comment stream. Do the same if you're watching on Twitter and Facebook, and then use the opportunity to connect with everyone else who's done the same. We do this every week, folks, and I think people who turn up every week end up getting like 20, 30 new connections all the time. And if you think about, people who would watch an industry webinar of this type on a Friday afternoon, which we all know people are slacking off already, it's only going to be passionate and innovative recruiters who are doing this. So improve your network and get talking about this topic, because we're going to have to come off air soon. Okay, cool. Let's bring on some of our other guests. We've been waiting very patiently. Let's bring on Jem Parker. Jem, are you still there? She is. And we're going to bring on Sian Sidaway as well. Let me see if Sian is here. Oh, there she is. Cool. Let's try this. I think we should be in good shape. We'll see how we go. Two debuts. So we've had Heidi and Christine on before, but this is the first time for Jem and Sian. And there she is. Hi, Jem. How are you?
Not too bad, thank you. How are you?
Great to see you. I'm very well, thank you. And hello, Sian. Great to see you.
Hi. How are you doing?
Yeah, we're doing great. So, okay, thanks for joining us, guys. Jem, why don't you go first? Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, no worries. So I'm Jem Parker and I work for EY. I'm the candidate engagement lead, and my job is basically to build and nurture talent pools, talent communities, and improve candidate experience across the whole process.
Fantastic stuff.
EY is not the firm, by the way, that took me out to the Beehive for 6-hour drinking session before offering me the job. Well, they probably would have done back then.
That would have happened. I'm sure there was a certain expectation at that point.
A pandemic.
That's it. Okay, great. Great to have you on the show, Jem. Sian, why don't you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, I'm Sian Sidaway and I work at GoCardless, and I've been here for about 4 years. So I've seen the company scale from 250 to where we are as 1,000. And yeah, the candidate experience has changed in that growth period. So yeah, I look after our global talent experience team.
Very, very interesting. And Sian, why don't we start with you on this? Because you mentioned this sense of change. So what has changed? Because we talked to Christine and Heidi before, and even though both of them have worked for big corps as well, but they talk. I asked them to talk specifically about their early stage type experience. Take us through how it has changed with a company like GoCardless, where it's gone from small to big. And we talked already about why this needs to change as it goes forward. So what are those changes?
Yeah, I think back to that point of, we used to be able to host every single interview in our offices, and much to the point earlier, like CTO would meet everybody, or Hiroki, our CEO, would have met everybody going through that process. And as you start to scale, we schedule hundreds of interviews on a monthly basis, and you can't have that kind of personalized individual approach where you meet everybody. And so when the pandemic happened, it was a really great opportunity to shift obviously into fully remote interviewing, but that meant that we had to enable all of our interviewers to be able to communicate what the brand presence was and what our values were in a much deeper way, where you don't have that interperson experience. So how can that translate across Zoom and still get that level of engagement? So yeah, it changed from that perspective. And I think to circle back to the point of like bias as well, we get often candidates or hiring managers asking, oh, can we meet that person, get them to come into the office? And you've got to apply that level of bias in that if we do it for one candidate, you've got to do it for all. And we can't do that at scale. And so, yeah, that's probably one of the biggest changes that we've had to implement.
So hang on, are you saying, Sian, that you vetoed the in-person because hiring managers not sure, as they never are, right? So I need to eyeball this person, and you're saying, nah, you can't do that because wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's a difficult thing, particularly for sales teams, where actually that conversation is very, very different in person. But when you consider every single candidate and their individual circumstances, people might not be able to get into the office if they have childcare or whatever it might be. And if you even say, oh, it's optional that you could come in, that still adds a layer of bias where that candidate has a higher sort of, I guess, level of interaction with those stakeholders and are more likely to be the ones that progress. And so, yeah, removing that element means that you're treating every candidate fairly.
So, and you would accept, Sian, and this is not a criticism, but you would accept there's this trade-off between having that sense of fairness, which I think everyone hearing this would agree. But you might understand that there's certain candidates that might have preferred to have that meeting also. So you could have had a situation where hiring manager and candidate might have both preferred to meet, and it's HR or TA's tough role to say, actually, no, you can't do that, because that's not the right time for that meeting.
Sian,
I think there was
Sorry, carry on and then I'll ask my question.
Yeah, I was going to say there's an element of, okay, if you get down to offer stage and you want to say, okay, let's meet in person or come into the office so that you get that environment, I think that stage is where you can bring that in. But up until that point, like for us, it's really important that every candidate has an equal playing field and is treated fairly.
Very, very interesting. Jem, I want you to come in on this. I mean, what are your thoughts on that approach that as you heard it? Do EY do something similar, or do you have a different philosophy?
No, I mean, I think COVID's obviously had a big impact on how we interview and how we recruit, and obviously EY recruits, thousands of people every year, so it's really difficult. I think moving to virtual has probably made the recruitment process maybe a wee bit easier in terms of handling the volumes that we handle. I kind of agree that it does present that level of equity for all candidates. I think it's difficult because I feel very passionate about the kind of neurodiversity space. So I think there's a lot of candidates who like a virtual interview with a webcam, and it's difficult to know how everyone will take that on board. And I guess you have to kind of look at that process and say, well, how can we take all the good things from it and make it standard? And then maybe over 6 months say, well, actually, some of these things didn't work, so let's take that out. I think as long as you're always reviewing it and trying to make that experience for the candidate better, regardless of the background that they come from, then you're kind of onto a winner. I think as long as your intent is good, I think that always does come across to candidates.
That's really interesting. And a couple of things you said there, Jem, which I want to explore in a little bit. Like almost anything you try is going to advantage a certain category of person against another, isn't it? Like not everyone is equally happy in every way to communicate, for instance. I, for instance, hate the telephone. I literally don't answer the telephone to the point where I've probably got into trouble. Because as soon as someone rings the phone, I actually have an anxiety attack. It's like, no, like I'm doing something. I don't want to be interrupted, and I just ignore it. And then it's like I gotta get back on a text or do whatever it is. So I'm not. I probably have kind of got myself into a situation where I've pathologized this. But you can imagine sort of this being a situation for in-person interviews, I think, always penalize the introverted type person, right? Which we, totally forgot about, we didn't even consider was an issue. And the Zoom interview is very difficult for some people also. And in fact, there's a gender variance there as well, because there's good evidence to say that there's a gender variance in terms of camera on, camera off preferences in first meetings, and women prefer slightly but significantly camera off experience compared to men. And this is because the theory is that women typically are more harshly judged in terms of appearance, and so more self-conscious that way. So hard to figure out how you would create. Maybe it is impossible to have a completely fair system for everyone. So what do we do about that? Do we have to come with an imperfect approach? Do we customize it? This is what we're talking about. Do we say to the candidate, how would you prefer to do it? But then if we do that, then we have a variable way of, like, we've lost a bit of data. Like, we've lost the consistency, haven't we? So how do we solve that conundrum?
I just want to quickly say something in response to what Sian and Jem and Yu-Hung have said. And I've got a little Easter egg here, which I didn't notice until just a minute ago. Behind me on that mantelpiece, there is a painting which was given to me by an artist called Beardo, which is Bill Berman.
Yes.
And it says, if one of us is not equal, none of us are equal. And I think it's really poignant to this particular subject.
Good point.
Definitely. I think when it comes to kind of like the process, so you have to try something first. I think if you can, when it comes to standardization versus customization, when you're trying to be equitable to everyone, you can't just take a massive leap and standardize everything to make sure that everyone has equity. I think part of the philosophy that we use is we trial it in a small niche group of candidates, take all the good bits from it, and then try and figure out how to put it into BAU. So, for example, like asking how people want to be interviewed, that's something that we do as standard now for recruiting people into kind of the neurodiverse centre of excellences that we have in the UK. How can we take all of that good stuff and the feedback we get from candidates and say, well, they loved getting all of their communications through video, or they loved getting a chance to be in a kind of virtual work simulation for a few days, or they, you know, and then they get the interview questions up front, right? That's something that's kind of low-hanging fruit, right? We can do that. We can standardize that. We can put that as part of BAU. So again, it's like, how do we recruit for tech people, right? Well, let's not assume their personas, try not to make assumptions about the candidates. Do a bit of A/B testing, figure it out, and then go, right, how can we push that into standardized recruitment processes? I think you have to kind of do it little step by little step rather than going, it's great to be aspirational, but you can't change the world in 24 hours. You have to just go at it a bit at a time.
I think that's a really good point. Oh, it's a really good point. And I think much like the way that we interview in different geos as well, you're going to have different nuances of how candidates like to get feedback or be communicated with, and you've got to take those things into consideration. And yeah, you can't change everything all at once in a blanket and go that's going to work. It's looking at those kind of individual nuances.
One other aspect of this, which actually I'm probably directing to Jem, I guess here specifically, is to do with the type of people that you're targeting. You want to hire. You can't have the same process. If you're an organization that everybody wants to work for, then you might have a certain process that is linked to that. And if you are an organization that people don't really consider to be an employer of much interest or whatever, then you're going to have a different process. And how in demand or not the candidate is links to that as well. So specifically to Jem is about, if I want to be an accountant and I'm like second year at university or whatever, EY is one of 4 options that I'm going to want to go and work for. And EY is absolutely in massive demand for me. If I am a Python developer, I'm probably going to be a bit more interested in certain other types of organizations than I am in what is known as an accountancy firm. So you probably won't have a standardized approach if EY is hiring a Python developer versus a second year, accountancy undergraduate. Would that be fair?
I mean, I think obviously if we're hiring a Python developer, there's someone in experience hiring. If we're hiring a second year grad, then there's someone in student. So the student processes are totally different anyway.
I'll make it more specific in that case. So if I am a newly qualified auditor at a non-Big Four firm like a BDO or something, then EY is a very aspirational move for me. Whereas if I'm a Python developer, it might not be. So that's probably a bit more of a good comparison. Yeah, and I think this is one of the big things that we're working on at the moment is we have areas of the business that we recruit thousands of people every year. We have a very kind of not a standing order skill set, but we have a very good understanding of exactly what that person looks like in terms of skills and qualifications. That's what they need to be able to go out and do a particular job for the client. Where you look at tech and you're hiring someone with Python, or we are not your typical organization, and that's where branding comes in. That's where exposure comes in. We have an intelligence team that sits within EY led by Lou Griffiths. She's amazing. If anyone wants to talk about intelligence, you should connect with her. But essentially, that is a team who are looking at where are people with Python skills going to? Where are they being hired from? What are those companies doing to attract those people? And then we try and build that into our employer branding strategies.
and into our communities. You know, if they come into a talent pool, I know you prefer the term talent pool, Adam, but like rather than a community, if they come into a talent pool, how are we engaging with them? You know, how are we nurturing them? How are we making sure that they feel engaged with us as an organization? So I think it comes down to branding at that point, and experience then comes from what you do with the candidates once you've got them in your talent pool.
So if I'm a candidate and everybody wants to hire me, I can make that employer jump through hurdles and do a decathlon. Whereas if I really desperately want to work for that company and that company knows it, they can make me do a decathlon. So, you know, I think it's not just at the branding stage. I think it's also at the like hiring stage as well, and like how you take somebody through maybe.
Well, I mean, I on go.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to jump in with this observation. But it's almost like the first contact, the sort of how you first encountered each other influences the type of candidate experience that you want to try and craft for this person. So, for instance, if I put an advert out, ad response comes in, that's going to be a different candidate experience compared to if I've just headhunted someone and like put in all kinds of effort to extract this highly valued individual from this place. So that's an example of having to personalize based on, I guess, our understanding of that disparity of who wants who, as you are saying, Adam. It's almost like if they want us more than them, and this is hard to say, but maybe this is a little bit true. They want us if they want us more than them, then we can get away with doing a little bit less. Whereas if we want them more than they want us, we have to do more, and that is kind of a method of concierging it and customizing it, but it deviates us away from this standardization approach. And I think maybe that's always going to be a little bit in tension there. A couple of more things I want to say. What is your attitude to known candidates? Do you treat them the same or do you treat them differently to someone who is unknown? So for instance, Sian, your ex-colleague from way back when or whatever, applies to a job at GoCardless. Are you saying to that person, hey, get in the front door like everyone else, get in queue? And I'm not saying you backdoor this person, but do you do something extra to recognize that social capital that you've been built? Same question to you, Jem. Like, what if you had someone who has gone through process before, came close, said no to us, and then they've reapplied later on? Do you use the same approach, or again, do we need to move away from standardization there and apply a little bit more nuance given the status of that relationship? Sian, your thoughts on that first?
Yeah, I think either be it a referral of somebody that's known or someone that has interviewed with us before, I think there still needs to be an element of assessing that candidate on the same merit as you would any other candidate. You've got to have a structure in place that says these are the key criteria of what we're looking to hire, and this is how that candidate needs to show up against those criteria. And so if you continually look at it from a perspective like, oh, we know them, so they're great, like I worked with them before, they're great, you're going to continue to keep hiring this same again, and you're not going to get diversity of thought or a kind of ever like growth in the company, because he's like, oh, they're just someone we've worked with before, they're great, let's hire them. So for us, like, we would still follow that kind of same structure of going, yeah, we know them, yeah, we've interviewed them before, or yes, they're referral, but they still need to actually qualify them against the requirements of the role.
We just to that diversity of thought thing, that actually ties in really well with one of the 7 trends that was in the newsletter in Korn Ferry's, like, what's going to happen in talent acquisition, which was to do with the growth of like exec and professional interim this year. That's what they're one of the 7 trends that they're predicting is there's going to be a lot more of that, and that's something that should help to achieve that. But it certainly doesn't do anything for the like diverse aspect of things.
There's someone there, Louise, very much agreed. This is nepotism. We'll talk about nepotism on another show because I want to defend nepotism. I think you can do nepotism right, folks. You can. Yeah, I know it's fucking heresy, but you know what? I've said it, so we'll have to do that show a bit later. Anyway, let's talk about the sort of a little bit more on this idea of the known candidate. Is it almost like a legal judgment where you would say, right, anybody who knows this person, get out of the process because, you know, you're biased, as simple as that, whether it's positive or negative? Do you have to have that conversation? And if so, like, what's the mechanism for that?
I don't know if it's aimed at either, but yeah, if that person has been referred or is known, we don't include that the interaction as a interviewer, so to remove that bias.
Like John's son, John, is coming in for an interview, for example.
Yeah,
definitely. You have to keep it separate.
I remember, I recall now, there was once upon a time when I was asked to interview the chairman's son for a job in the team. And I just thought, got to hire him, haven't I? what am I going to do?
That's a box checking exercise. If
exactly.
Ever there was one.
What do you want me to do? You know, do you want me to say no to this fellow? And it was like, yeah, everyone just recognized us as shoo-in. And yeah, that was an uncomfortable scenario. Turned out he was pretty decent, but it was like, you know, could have been terrible, couldn't he? Anyway, listen, we're running massively short on time, so let's finish off with just a couple of recommendations from you two, Jem and Sian. People are listening to this and they're thinking, okay, I'm still wrestling with this idea of we've rolled out what we hope is a fair, standardized, collecting metrics and all the rest of it, but we're still getting some reports from candidates that are not happy with being treated in, you know, a procedural manner, let's say. What would your advice be to try and correct for that? A couple of points that you might want to recommend. How about your thoughts first, Jem?
I think when it comes to kind of candidate experience generally, like, and someone's put in the comments, you can't please everyone. So I think you have to try and find something that works kind of fairly levelly across the board. I think one of the big things is learning from like your best recruiters, because like some people might just have an ATS, some people might have a CRM and an ATS, some people might have an Excel spreadsheet and they don't have any like way to really automate. So I think my first thing would be to push the limits of whatever tech you've got. How can you standardize what you can standardize, automate what you can automate, and allow your recruiters to have really lots of human contact with the candidate, having valuable conversations and not just doing transactional stuff, like telling them about, I don't know, like interview timings or things like that. And then learn from your best recruiters so that they look at the metrics, who's got good hires, who's got good diversity, who has good processes in terms of scheduling, you know, prepping candidates, prepping hiring managers, and then try and use their expertise to upskill your team and candidate experience. Because ultimately, you can put in all the processes you like and all the automation, but you hit a person who's not involved or doesn't feel engaged with being a champion of candidate experience, and that whole process has just fallen off a cliff.
Yeah. So look basically at the high performers in the team that are doing a good job, regardless of whether they've done it on a prescription. Maybe they've just used their own initiative or they've got their own small techniques to try and improve this thing. Great. Have a look at what they're doing and try and surface that up to the rest of the team. That's a great tip. Your thoughts on this, Sian? Like one tip, quick sort of bit of advice to the person who says, you know what, I'm still getting bad reports from these candidates. Like, how would you go and advise that person?
Yeah, I completely agree. You're never going to be able to make every single person happy. We've been using Starred for about a year now, and I think that's massively helped us to be able to recognize what our priorities are and areas to improve. And I think one of the big things for us is like that transparency from the very, very beginning of the process of saying upfront to the candidate, this is what the process is going to look like. We started to create like different candidate packs where we give insight and a little bit of prep onto this is what to expect at interview 1, this is what to expect at interview 2. So you don't blindside any candidates. They know what is coming, they know what to expect. And for some, that might mean that they go, okay, I'm going to walk away from this process because I don't want to go through X, Y, Z. But for others, that transparency is, really, really beneficial. And they end up having a really great experience because of that.
You know what? I think a great deal of anxiety in recruiting is exactly the lack of transparency, isn't it? It's you don't know what the expectation is and what the involvement. I think the reason why a lot of candidates initially reject recruiters' contact is that they don't know what the commitment is. But if that's public and you've got it transparently on the thing, it would really empower the recruiters to even say that. Say, hey, listen, Here's how we recruit generally. You can see what the commitment is and how fast or slow you want to go, and what kind of things we expect from you, or what kind of things you can expect from us. And then suddenly it's a more equitable experience than, you know, just walking blindly into a funnel, which could be all sorts. I remember, what does it mean when I say yes? I remember actually a candidate saying this to me back in my recruiting days, when I was an active recruiter. You know, it was like trying to headhunt people. So yeah, look, if I say yes to this, what does it mean? Am I like a high pressure funnel into before you know it, here's a job offer, take the job. You know, so yeah, there's lots of things we can go and improve. Folks, one thing I've educated on me today on this show is that basically this is a much more complicated topic than can be covered on one show. We're gonna have to try and get another part 2 on this. I'm fascinated in particular about the known candidate thing. I think that's something that's highly relevant, particularly if we're going to do a lot more boomerang hiring and hiring for alumni and stuff like this. I think people are going to start oscillating in and out of businesses a lot more frequently. So, okay, how do we apply, the candidate experience methodologies there? So lots of things to talk about, but we're out of time. So we have to say goodbye to Jem and Sian here. Jem, thank you so much for joining us. And Sian, thanks for joining us.
Don't kick Jem off for a second. I've got to tell Jem something really quickly, very funny. When I was about a month into recruiting accountants in 1999, I got a phone call coming in from an advert I'd put in the paper, and the person said, "Hi, it's Sarah here. I work for E&Y and blah blah blah." And then I went, "Right, okay, thanks, Sarah. Good to talk to you. By the way, I wrote down the name of your employer. Can I just confirm the spelling? IANWYE. Is that right? That's how you spell E&Y?" She was like, she never phoned me back. She was like,
yeah. Listen, loads of people still don't know who EY are, so I totally understand. I think it's if you know, you know.
I was meant to be an accountancy recruiter.
Oh no, yeah. The absolute joke of a recruiter, Adam. Thank God you left that profession and improved it by leaving it. Okay, let's say goodbye to Jem and Sian. It's been great having you. We'll definitely have you back if you're interested, guys. Have a very good day. Wonderful to see you on the show, folks.
Thanks,
you. Everyone. Bye.
Weren't they smart? They were so good. I guess they're great. I mean, I don't know why, because there's a lot of I guess I don't really know. I didn't know.
Presumably you get somebody else to reach out to them, because I don't understand why these people turn up for you.
Thank you very much, mate. But hey, this is all concierge from Hung Lee, yeah.
You've got some sort of talent sourcer going out doing like a proper exec headhunting job on these folk to get them on the show.
Do you know what? I don't. And the reason why I don't is because I actually get those messages myself, and I don't like them. I just think they're so like, oh, I'm representing this person that does this, and I'm saying, well, yeah, but what does it mean if I say yes to this? I mean, I just don't like that intermediacy. It's like, look, you can get people on a DM real quick, so you know.
I got one last week. and was asked if I wanted to be part of something, and I said, yeah, sure. Here's my email address, and they said, yeah, no, actually, what we want you to do is you just record it and send us the video. I went.
No, that's free content for you, so I'm not giving it to you. So anyway, that was really good, folks. Listen, we'll be back next week. Don't forget, by the way, Start are the sponsors of the show. Thank you very much to Lars for building this wonderful product. You've heard, if you care about CX, definitely check it out. If you haven't got a supporting tool, Start with a ed.com. We're back next week, folks, and guess what we're doing? We're doing recruiter use cases for ChatGPT Part 2. Last time we ran this show, we broke all records in terms of numbers of people watching. 1,000 people concurrently. The ticker stopped working at Crowdcast. We're going to do it again because we need to basically get to the bottom of it. It changes so fast as well. Like every single week, a new revelation, a new technique, a new update happens that changes the game again. So once again, we're going to repeat process. We've got a bunch of recruiter practitioners who are going to come on and show us what they know about this technology. And then we've got product makers that come in and pitch their products. And then we're going to get some wise heads at the end, talk about why it's the end for all recruiters and stuff. Anyway, make sure you tune up for that. It's going to be 12 o'clock again next week, Friday the 10th. So sign up for that. Follow the channel for more details. See you next week, folks. That was pretty good, I thought.
Cool. Yeah, enjoyed that subject. All 4 guests were excellent, and yeah, it was good.
I should have got them all at the same time, to be honest. But because I thought maybe that interaction between the 4 of them would be great. But I was concerned there might have been too many people on screen, and it's hard to have everyone watching someone else talk. So yeah, it's difficult. Got to think about that.
So, what are you doing for the weekend?
I've actually cleared out Saturday because I've got to do the work. I've got to do some newsletter writing, obviously. On Sunday, I've been told I've got to go to my dad's village for some sort of like village feast. It's all feasting, mate. I've been eating so much. I've been here 7 days. I reckon I put on 3 kilos straight off because every single meal is an overeat. Every single one.
Well, that's just about your own personal discipline, isn't it?
It's not. You can't say no. It's like this is a very food-based culture. So in the same way, if you're in Glasgow back in the day, having a pint, refusing a pint from someone who's offered you, that's no bueno. Here it's the same. It's like you can't say no to food. Yeah, you're gonna eat that. You're gonna eat and ask for seconds. So yes,
people they're not even overweight though, are they, in Hong Kong? People
not at all. Not at all.
How is that then? Because like rice, for example, is like massive glycogen spikes.
There's a lot of diabetes in this part of the world because of that. But there's not a lot of fat. I think it's a lot of it is maybe because of mobility. People walk a lot. It's not particularly sedentary. And I've noticed as well that people are, I mean, obviously COVID makes a difference, etc. But it's not the same thing as having a suburbia where you can be like not going into town is like a project or maybe something you do once a week. But here everyone goes into town every day to do a daily shop for food. So it's not a big culture of freezing stuff or having a big fridge or something. It's like, hey, go to the market, get some fresh stuff. So I think that more mobility will knock some, get your metabolism going, So it's a different world. Anyway, what are you doing this weekend, mate, yourself?
Playing rugby tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Calcutta Cup matches tomorrow. England v Scotland at 4 o'clock, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think there must be another Six Nations game on tomorrow as well. So tomorrow is a weekend, is a day of rugby, and Sunday I'm going to read Recruiting Brainfood and study for next Sunday,
which
next
we
Friday.
didn't even review today, which I totally forgot about. But yeah,
we ran out of time. I don't think you did your sound check either.
No, I did a sound check, but I was too busy. I was too busy trying to create a gag for your unemployment, but I didn't successfully create a joke for it because we all know you decided to chill out. Anyway, we should have a talk about what the hell you're doing, by the way. Not to say I can offer anything, but I'm going to start a newsletter called Recruiting Health Food. Please do it. I would love for you to do it. That would be so funny. Actually, you could do some work for Brainfood. You could do some customer service for us, mate. Because I literally, I can't do it. It's like I'm all over the place. Anyway, listen. We'll talk next week, mate.
I'm busy washing my hair. See you, man.
All right. See you later. Dear.